What scares you isn't always distance. Sometimes it's the moment someone feels safe enough to touch the part of you that stopped bracing. You can survive mixed signals. You can survive absence. But real warmth can feel dangerous because it asks nothing from your armor except that it soften. And that is where your body gets confused. It reads calm like exposure, steadiness like risk, and closeness like the beginning of a loss. So you don't always run from cold people. Sometimes you pull away from the ones who finally make it possible to stay. That reaction can look irrational from the outside. Inside, it feels almost embarrassingly logical. Because distance is painful, but familiar. Emotional safety is gentler, yet it can wake up every place in you that still expects disappointment. You tell yourself you want consistency. Then it arrives, and suddenly you feel restless, skeptical, or weirdly trapped. Not because you don't care, because being cared for can expose how long you've been surviving on emotional guesswork. When love is unclear, your system knows the job. Watch closely, scan the tone, fill in the blanks, prepare for the shift. Ambiguity keeps you activated, but it also keeps you defended. You never fully relax, which means you never fully have to trust. But when someone is kind in a steady way, a different fear appears. Now there is something real to lose, not just something confusing to chase. And that changes everything. Hope becomes heavier when it no longer feels imaginary. You may notice it after a good date. You felt seen, laughed easily, maybe even said more than you meant to. Then the next morning your chest feels tight. You reread your own openness like it was a mistake. You start looking for proof you misread them. Maybe they texted slightly later, used fewer emojis, sounded normal instead of glowing. Nothing dramatic happened, but your mind begins building distance before your heart gets attached. This is one of the quieter attachment conflicts adults carry. The problem isn't simply wanting love or fearing love. It's wanting closeness while feeling most emotionally organized around self-protection. It's learning to trust people only after already half preparing for them to leave. Some people learned early that connection came with unpredictability. Affection might have been there, but not always when it was most needed. So now consistency doesn't always feel soothing right away. Sometimes it feels suspicious, almost too good, almost like something you shouldn't lean on. Because leaning was never just leaning. It was exposure, dependence, and the risk of being let down while already open. That's why your nervous system may treat steady love like a delayed threat, not because safety is harmful, but because it removes the distance that once protected you. Distance gives you room to manage yourself. You can miss someone from a controlled angle. You can long for them without handing them real access. You can stay emotionally involved while still keeping an emergency exit. Safety closes that exit a little and invites your real needs into the room. And real needs are rarely the part you feel proud of. The need to be chosen, reassured, remembered, responded to, handled gently. You may be very good at appearing low maintenance, calm voice, measured texts, no dramatic demands, plenty of "I'm good." But underneath that composure, there can be a quiet hunger for emotional certainty. Not perfection, just the feeling that you don't have to guess. The painful part is that when someone starts offering that certainty, you might become harder to reach. You go quiet right when what you want is finally getting closer. Sometimes that's because safety makes your deeper needs visible to you, and seeing them can feel more vulnerable than not getting them at all. It is easier to call yourself independent than to admit how much tenderness matters. Easier to act unbothered than to risk being seen as needy. So when someone says, "You can tell me what's wrong," part of you melts. Another part instantly starts editing itself. You sink. Don't say too much. Don't make this heavy. Don't hand them a map to where it hurts. Because once someone knows where it hurts, they can hold it, but they can also mishandle it. That is why emotionally safe people can sometimes feel more destabilizing than unavailable ones. Unavailable people keep the relationship in theory. Safe people move it into reality. Reality asks for trust, and trust asks for surrender. You may not know how to pace. This shows up in tiny moments. They ask if you're okay, and your first answer is always yeah, even when your eyes say otherwise. They notice your silence, and instead of enjoying the care, you feel cornered by it. Not by them, but by how much they can suddenly see. It shows up after intimacy too. You have a deep conversation, maybe cry a little, maybe let them witness something soft. Then you become strangely formal the next day. polite, delayed, slightly colder, as if you need to rebalance the closeness. You may even miss them while avoiding them. That contradiction makes sense when distance is the only place your feelings feel manageable. Missing someone hurts, but it keeps the longing private. Being close to them means they might actually affect you. And being affected can feel like losing control. Not because closeness is weak, but because it reaches the parts of you that control was built to protect. So you start doing subtle things. You reply warmly, but not too warmly. You share something honest, then quickly change the subject. You lean in, then disappear just enough to prove you still can. Sometimes you test love without calling it a test. You mention something vulnerable halfway, then watch carefully to see whether they stay steady. You wait to see if their tone changes. You notice whether their attention softens, whether their warmth feels patient or performative. If they remain kind, relief doesn't always come first. Sometimes grief does, because their gentleness highlights how long you've been adapting to less. It exposes the emotional conditions you once convinced yourself were normal. That's why a healthy dynamic can bring up sadness before comfort. It doesn't just feel good. It also reveals what you've been missing, and that recognition can be heavier than people realize. You may sit next to someone who is genuinely trying and still feel the urge to create space. Not because they're too much, because their steadiness makes your old loneliness visible in high definition. This is where many people misread themselves. They assume the loss of intensity means the loss of chemistry. But calm is not always boredom. Sometimes calm is the first environment where your defenses no longer have a clear job. And when a defense loses its job, it doesn't quietly retire. It protests. It whispers that something is off. It tells you to be careful. Slow down. Don't trust this yet. It can even romanticize the relationships that kept you unsure. Uncertainty feels deep when your body is trained to equate effort with value. So stable love may seem strangely flat at first. No chasing, no decoding, no emotional cliff edge to keep you alert. Yet that flatness is often just unfamiliar peace. And unfamiliar peace can feel empty before it feels safe. This is why some people feel most attached when they are the one waiting. Waiting gives them a role. Hoping, interpreting, proving, staying available, making sense of scraps. It hurts, but it feels active. Being loved well is a different role. It asks you to receive, not chase. And receiving can be far more exposing than earning, because now your worth is not hidden inside effort. Now it has to exist while you are still, while you are known, while you are not performing your usefulness. That is a hard moment for many guarded people. They know how to be impressive, supportive, resilient, even deeply loyal. They don't always know how to let themselves be held without apologizing for it, or without feeling indebted the whole time. So emotional safety can trigger a strange sadness. You realize how often you translated love into labor. How often you felt closest to people while privately bracing against them. How often you've called vigilance a connection. And once you see that, certain relationship patterns stop looking romantic. They start looking exhausting. Think about the moments you overread. The shorter text, the distracted glance, the sigh on the phone. For someone with emotional caution, those details rarely feel small. They feel like the beginning of a shift you should have predicted. But here is the deeper thing. That hyper-awareness is not always proof that you're intuitive. Sometimes it is proof that your body learned to study love instead of simply live inside it. It became fluent in change because change once mattered too much. So when a safe person stays consistent, there is less to analyze. That should feel freeing. Instead, it can leave you face to face with yourself, with your own needs, your own fear, your own difficulty, receiving ease. This is why reassurance can feel complicated. You crave it, but asking for it can make you feel small. You want the message, the hand on your back, the simple "I'm here," but needing it out loud can stir shame. So you wait for them to notice on their own. If they do, you feel seen. If they don't, you tell yourself not to care. Then you quietly ache anyway. That ache often turns into distance. Not dramatic distance, but the kind that enters through tone. Less warmth, shorter answers, a tiny emotional step back. Protection rarely announces itself before it changes the atmosphere. And the other person may feel it immediately. They sense the coldness but not the fear under it. So they assume you've lost interest. Meanwhile, you're sitting inside a storm you haven't translated. This is how people who deeply want closeness can accidentally create confusion. Their longing is real, but their protection edits the signal. They reach, then retract. They soften, then armor up. They ask for nearness with their heart and refuse it with their posture. None of that makes them manipulative by default. It makes them conflicted. And conflict in intimacy can look like contradiction until you understand its purpose. The purpose is not to punish love. The purpose is to survive exposure, to stay one step ahead of disappointment, even if that step costs real connection. But survival strategies have side effects. They do not only protect you from pain, they also protect you from being fully met. They can keep good love standing outside the door, knocking politely, while you insist you're fine. That is the honest cost. Not just loneliness, but loneliness with witnesses. Being with someone who cares and still feeling half-hidden. Being loved in parts because showing the whole thing still feels too dangerous. And that kind of loneliness can be hard to explain. It doesn't look like abandonment. It looks like sitting on the edge of a safe bed with your guard still on. It looks like hearing, "I'm not going anywhere," and feeling your body refuse to believe it. This is why emotional maturity is not just learning to choose better people. It is also learning not to treat better treatment like a trap. It is learning that the urge to pull away is information, not always instruction. A feeling can be real without being a direction. That matters, because if you obey every protective impulse, you may end up loyal to a fear that no longer deserves leadership. The goal isn't to force yourself into instant openness. That usually becomes another performance. The goal is smaller, quieter, harder, to notice the flinch without building a whole identity around it. To say, something in me wants to disappear right now, and to get curious before you obey it. What just got touched? What feels exposed? What am I suddenly trying to prevent? Sometimes the answer is simple. You mattered for a second and that felt dangerous. You enjoyed them too much. You let their kindness land. You imagined staying, and your system panicked at the size of that hope. There is nothing weak about that reaction. It is protective in the oldest sense. But old protection is not always current wisdom. It can mistake possibility for danger just because both require openness. And openness has weight. It means letting someone matter before you have guarantees. It means allowing comfort to reach you before you know exactly how the story ends. That can feel unbearable when you built your peace around emotional self-containment. Yet self-containment has limits. It can keep you stable, but it cannot fully keep you warm. It can help you avoid disappointment, but it can also make genuine love feel like something happening outside the glass. So the real question is not, why do I get scared of closeness? The real question is, what kind of closeness taught me to brace in the first place? Once you ask that, the pattern becomes less shameful, more specific, more workable. You stop calling yourself too much or too broken or bad at relationships. You start seeing the exact moments your fear puts on a calm face. The delayed reply that follows tenderness. The joking tone after something real. The sudden urge to focus on flaws when someone is actually good to you. Those moments are not random. They are the hinge points where safety and fear meet. And if you can recognize them, you gain something powerful. Not perfect control, but choice. Choice to stay 1 minute longer in the conversation. Choice to answer honestly when the easy answer is nothing. Choice to say, I think I'm pulling back because this matters. That sentence alone can change the emotional climate of a relationship. Not because it solves everything, because it tells the truth before protection turns into distance. And truth creates a different kind of closeness, slower, cleaner, less confusing. The right person may not fix this for you, but they can help make safety feel less theoretical. They can be steady without chasing you, warm without forcing you, present without demanding instant access to every hidden room inside you. That matters more than intensity ever did, because intense attention can feel flattering. Consistent care feels personal. It stays after the mood changes, after the hard day, after the part of you that wants to withdraw steps forward. Still, even with the right person, there will be moments when distance feels easier. That does not mean you are failing. It means your old map is still active, and new maps take repetition. They take being responded to without punishment. They take saying I need a little reassurance and surviving the vulnerability of hearing yourself say it. They take letting kind people be kind without immediately searching for the catch. That may sound small. It is not small. For some people, that is a whole internal revolution. Because love stops being a puzzle to solve. It becomes an experience to inhabit. And inhabiting love is different from studying it. You cannot fully do both at once. You cannot constantly prepare for the shift and also relax into the moment that has not shifted. One posture feeds fear, the other slowly teaches trust. This is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming more honest than your defenses. Honest enough to admit that distance sometimes feels cleaner, but not deeper. Honest enough to admit that emotional safety can feel threatening precisely because it matters more. And once you understand that, your pullback stops looking so mysterious. It starts looking like grief mixed with hope. Grief for how long you had to protect yourself. Hope because something gentler is finally close enough to scare you. Maybe that is the strangest part. Sometimes your fear does not mean you're with the wrong person. Sometimes it means you are near a kind of love your old survival logic does not know how to measure. Love that is not trying to win you through chaos. Love that is simply staying. And staying can be the most unnerving thing of all when you are used to earning closeness in unstable rooms. So if emotional safety feels more threatening than distance, it does not mean you are incapable of love. It means your body may trust distance more than peace. And that can change, not overnight and not through force. It changes when you stop shaming the part of you that braces. It changes when you learn to notice safety without needing to sabotage it. It changes when you let care feel unfamiliar without automatically calling it wrong. That is how guarded hearts begin to soften without betraying themselves. Not by dropping every wall at once, by opening one window and realizing the whole house does not collapse. By staying present after tenderness instead of disappearing from it. By letting a calm moment be a calm moment. By understanding that the urge to retreat is not the deepest truth about you. It is only the oldest one. And old truths can lose authority, especially when newer experiences keep arriving with steady hands. So maybe the real turning point is this. You stop asking why safety scares you and start asking whether fear deserves the final vote. Because distance may feel cleaner. It may feel more organized, more dignified, more under control. But it cannot hold you. It cannot reassure the parts of you that only heal in the presence of something gentle and real. The painful irony is that the love you are most able to tolerate is not always the love that can nourish you. The love that nourishes you may first unsettle you. Not because it is unsafe, because it asks you to live without your usual armor being in charge. And maybe that is the clearest sign of all. The threat is not always closeness. Sometimes the threat is being loved well enough that you can no longer pretend distance is protecting you more than it is costing you.